Tanse, Erica Violet Lee, Nitsigasan, Misaskatomanik Nitotsen. My name is Erica Violet Lee. I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6 territory. It's an honor to be here tonight on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. I want to say thank you to Claudette and Verna for being here to open tonight in a good way. It's always really an honor for me to get to speak on the same stage as the women who gave me a voice in the first place. And I want to thank everyone who set up this room, and thank you to Council of Canadians and Ecology Ottawa for inviting me. Thank you to all the land defenders on this land who are holding it down so we can even be here right now. So this is Saskatoon. This is inner city Saskatoon, where I'm from, the west side of the city, which is predominantly Indigenous people. So I come from a really gorgeous, amazing space where it's an urban area filled with Indigenous people. So I get to be around my people all the time, Neheo people, Cree people. I grew up learning the language in schools. For as much as Saskatchewan gets a reputation as a racist, horrible place, there's also a lot of beautiful resistance and beautiful people who live there. When I talk about resistance, obviously this is the legacy that I come from. This is just last winter, I guess it's almost been a year, we had an anti-police brutality rally in inner city Saskatoon, and this is the school that I went to kindergarten through grade 4 at Pleasant Hill. I was part of the Canadian Youth Climate Delegation to COP21 in Paris, and I see one of my fellow delegation members. Where are you? Gab. So yeah, we got a really great group of people in Paris together to experience the climate negotiations and sort of the heartbreak of that. I think we all realized quite early into that process that probably nothing was going to happen substantially. So we did our best to sort of keep together and talk about possible solutions outside of that UN space, where really we were only allowed to protest within the designated protest zones at our designated protest times. And so we have a bunch of amazing youth over there in Paris trying to figure out what we can do to deal with the issues in our communities. And basically that was the platform we were given, and we realized there's something wrong here. This is one of my avenues of resistance at the climate negotiations in Paris. Basically the only one I had. This is Brad Wall, the Premier of Saskatchewan. One of our first nights in Paris, we ended up at this very, very bougie, very fancy Canadian government and embassy reception for all of the Canadian and provincial leaders who were at the climate conference in Paris. And all the premiers were there, and we were all just sort of huddled as a delegation thinking, well, how do we even start? With Brad Wall, there's nowhere to start because Indigenous people have told him over and over and over again that we don't want uranium mining in our communities, we don't want oil in our communities, we don't want all of these exploitative products, we don't want the Saskatchewan tar sands, which is his big pet project. So I stood there and I thought, in the face of all of the things that elders have told him, that old women have told him, that old men and people who are trappers on the land have told him, what can I even say? So I stuck out my tongue and took it wasn't a selfie, actually, it was Gab that took the photo. It was Gab that took the photo, and people thought it was a selfie, which was kind of funny. And so then I posted it online as a joke. I could not believe the hate that I got in response. It was mostly people telling me that I was a disrespectful little girl. I got called a lot of really unfortunate gendered, sexualized terms from people just for this photo. And basically, the way that I framed it was the fact that I was completely powerless in this situation. He was surrounded by bodyguards, and the second after we took this photo, he left the room. There was nothing I could say to him that people haven't said a million times before. This is Sylvia McAdam Sesiwam. She is one of my good friends and one of the women who started the Idle No More movement in Saskatoon, who organized the original Idle No More, so-called Idle No More event in my neighborhood in inner city Saskatoon in Saskatchewan in 2012. And these are the lands that she saved from clear cutting. This is some of the clear-cutting devastation that's happening up north, and this is something that people aren't talking about. Land defenders are on their lands, on their traditional territories, setting up camp. She set up a camp here, and this is what gives me hope when I think about all of the insurmountable problems we're facing in the prairie, is just the fact that setting up a little camp, putting up signs that say Treaty 6 territory, no trespassing, which keep getting knocked down, but then put back up again by Sylvia and the help of all of her, the young people that come out to visit her on the land. This is the forks of the South Saskatchewan and the North Saskatchewan River. This is the river that this summer was the victim of the Husky energy pipeline leak and spill of over 250,000 liters of bitumen and dilutant chemical into our rivers. It's called Kitsakatchewanasipi, which means swift-flowing river, the North Saskatchewan River. This is a picture of some of the oil that was collected and taken out of the river by one of the local First Nations people. A lot of indigenous people went and saw the oil down by their shores on their reserves. Thunderchild First Nation, which is my reserve, was one of the communities where people went down as soon as the oil spill happened and started collecting samples of the oil. They also started taking pictures and documenting the animals that were killed. It was funny because the government and Husky Energy, who were in charge of their own surveillance for the first little while, the numbers that they released was like 13 dead animals. And from social media and from people reporting online, we knew that wasn't the case. We knew that there were beavers, there were fish, there were hundreds of thousands of crayfish, small marine creatures that were killed by this oil spill. And we know that the effects of this oil spill are still continuing today. When I went down to visit the North Saskatchewan River, this is what it looked like when they said it was safe to drink. This is a picture of some of my professors, Julie Kay and Rob Innes's children, playing at the forks of the North Saskatchewan River, where we held water ceremonies. There were water ceremonies held by Indigenous people and settlers alike all along the river bank, and none of this was really covered by the media. One of the things that really changed my relationship to the river was this oil spill, and it's a shame that I didn't understand as an urban Indigenous person the importance of those rivers to my life in the city as someone who didn't grow up understanding the importance of those rivers. And some of the Indigenous scholarship you should know about, these are fish drawings by Zoe Todd. She's an anthropologist, an Indigenous Métis anthropologist here at Carleton University. And she does these fish drawings and talks about how fish are our kin. These are the creatures that we're accountable to. So if Trudeau wants to reconcile with people, if Bradwell wants to reconcile, start with the fish. Here, this is in North Battleford, and you can see this is one of the water pipelines that was transporting clean water into the cities that had to shut off their water, and it was taking it from the Battle River and from these sacred rivers where Indigenous people have protected them. That's the only reason why we have this water available, is because of land defenders. This is the North Saskatchewan River again, and you can't really see it in this picture, but there were the booms set up on the river banks trying to collect the oil, and it was kind of pathetic to see how little of an area they covered. And this was the nets that were being used to catch the oil. And of course, my friend Mylan Tatusis said, think of how much arrogance you have to have as people to be able to affect something this huge. Right? This is a creature. This is something that we believed is a being that has a life of its own, an agency of its own, purpose of its own. So yeah, the magnitude of the spill is really devastating to me. This is one of the ads that came out asking Indigenous people to be part of the cleanup efforts. And this happened almost immediately after. And of course, they want you to be able to pass a random drug and alcohol test, must be hardworking and reliable, because apparently that's a problem with Indigenous people and not the oil companies that are spilling oil into our water. And of course, I want to connect this back. So it's also about the more than human relations, the fish, it's about the water, it's about all of those creatures, it's about the people and the history. This is North Battleford, and North Battleford, near where the oil spill was the site in 1885 of various rebellions, the Louis Riel Rebellion, or resistance, Métis resistance, and also 8 Cree and Stoney warriors were hung here by the Saskatchewan government and the RCMP. So all of the land where this environmental destruction is happening has history, and it's racialized history. This is Colton-Boushie. Late this summer, while we were still dealing with the aftermath of the oil spill, and the oil spill still coming into our communities, being forced to clean it up ourselves, Colton-Boushie was shot by a farmer when he was coming back from an afternoon of swimming in the North Saskatchewan River with his friends and his girlfriend. And he went onto a farmer's lot to ask for help with a flat tire. The farmer shot and killed him. We had protests in North Battleford on the day of the farmer's bail hearing. The main justification for Colton-Boushie being shot that the farmer gave was that he was trespassing on his land. And when I think of people like Sylvia McAdam, who's being called a trespasser for protecting her land from logging trucks, or this young boy who was shot for simply swimming in this river that his ancestors had swum in 4 centuries before, I think it's not Indigenous people who are the trespassers, it's oil companies, it's mining companies, and it's people who want to take the land from us. It was a really gorgeous and beautiful resistance, and people are tying environmental violence to violence on the bodies of Indigenous people, the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit people. All of these things are part of the same system of colonization and devaluing of Indigenous knowledges. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Standing Rock, North Dakota, at the Sacred Stone Camp. And this is the site that you see as the sun is going down over the Sacred Stone Camp. And it is gorgeous and beautiful, and reminds me, again, that these people are being told that they're trespassers. They're being told that they're not welcome there, but we know that the land is the only place we're welcome right now. So I wanted to give a shout out to that prairie resistance, even though there's a colonial border now separating us. This is Cannonball River, one of the main rivers that they're protecting right now in the Sacred Stone Camp. This was our response to the Saskatchewan oil spill. These are mostly urban Indigenous people from the inner city of Saskatoon who got together and started doing water ceremonies. Here we're just singing a song and drumming on the banks of the South Saskatchewan River, which meets in the north at the forks, as I showed you, with the North Saskatchewan River. And this is beautiful to me because as an urban Indigenous person, I reconnected with this water that flows right through our city, recognizing how important it is, and how important it is for us to, in the face of exhaustion, complete exhaustion, fighting racism, fighting sexism, fighting environmental destruction, we came together to sing every night. And it was one of the most rejuvenating, beautiful things that came out of, not as a result, but in response to the oil spill. So I hope that, and as the speakers here have shown me tonight, I hope that we can continue to build solidarity. I hope that we can start to value Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous people and Indigenous bodies on these lands. Stay strong. Ginana Eskamatan.